Today, I'm delighted to welcome my guest, Katarina Berg, CHRO at On, back to the Digital HR Leader podcast. Welcome back to the show, Katarina. I can't believe it's been 6 years since you were last on as a guest. Can you let listeners know what's been going on in your world since? I know there's been a few changes.
First, thank you for having me back. I'm excited to be here, David. And 6 years, yes, that is it's crazy to think what has happened that could be maybe for this audience. I worked at Spotify then, and now I work at On. I lived in Sweden, Stockholm then. Now I'm in Zurich, Switzerland. Um, Otherwise, I think I've just got 6 years older.
And haven't we all in that time, because we spoke before the pandemic. We did our last podcast episode in person in our office in London when we used to record podcasts in person. And then something called the pandemic happened, and things obviously have changed. And we're going to talk about how HR has become even more center stage throughout our conversation today. Obviously you were at Spotify for a long time, and I've got the book that you published, I think, in 2023 in Sweden and 2024 in the UK here as well. Bold, um, you know, bold. That's a word I always associate with you, Katarina. Do you want to talk to that word a little bit and why you think it's such an important word for chief people officers, chief HR officers, frankly, anyone in HR to be to put at the forefront of their mind?
Yeah, I sure would like to, because I think I have now a relationship to that word that I was not necessarily anticipating when we put that on the book. It kind of follows me, and maybe it's strange that I'm surprised it does. But I think the word that I used to use a lot was courage, especially when we talked about leaders, and it's never been as complex, it's never been as hard, it's never been as challenging, and therefore never been more fun to be a leader. And then I always talked about the willingness, but also the courage to lead. And then I don't think I never said bold that much. And then when we were discussing kind of the title of the book, and especially with the publisher, they had a big like picture of me, and we had a different title. The title was actually, for the longest time, everything the CFO wants to ask about HR but don't dare to. It was too long, and then it ended up to be bold. And then I didn't want my pictures. I wanted to have a bold color that I usually don't wear because I'm not scared of color. So that's how it ended up. But if you place it in the world of HR, I think it's quite of a fitting word, but because I don't think there is as easy as two schools to subscribe to. There's so many more, and there's so many nuances. But we just go back to that pandemic, and also when we started to write the book more sincerely, and also leaning in a bit more. There was so many different changes, also to the HR colleagues and the people in the profession that maybe had a more kind of background type of roles, or where the function was not center and left and right and high and low. And I think that really kind of got the energy back into to the work and what it means and how important it is. No matter if you play it low key or if you are kind of dead center of the business. And I think therefore it's something that I think is important, because there were no playbook, which now, again, with AI and all the development, there is no playbook. And you will not have all the answers, but you will have data sets. But more importantly, you will have intuition, which is nothing else than experience, right? And then sometimes you have to make choices. And nobody nobody will blame you for making the wrong decisions, because you're the only one that's going to course correct them, right? And therefore, I think you need to be bold. And you can't really collect and collect and collect and be kind of a squirrel in that sense. So you just have to be bold. And I think it comes with a couple of statements, and also the way that you want to lead. And if you want to put human or people in the center.
No, very good, and I love the word courage as well. I think, and I love that. It's great to hear the stories of how book titles get formed, I like that one actually. Everything your CFO should know about HR, and that's a really good title as well. So you mentioned obviously you recently moved to On as chief HR officer there, and I believe you've been there. I think it's 100 days almost exactly today. So when you and obviously you have the benefit of having been a chief people officer before at Spotify for a number of years. But when you step into a chief people officer or new chief people officer role, Katarina, how do you approach those first 100 days? What are the core questions you're trying to answer, and where do you spend your time?
As close as possible or human possible to the business. I think now after plus 30 years within the service of HR, I think I have the HR acumen. So it's all about trying to understand what I don't understand and trying to plug the gaps of what I don't not yet know about the people, but also the way that we operate. I left an admired culture and I joined an admired culture. And it's all about the build. And if I'm going to help them build that and be maybe in some sort of leading role for that too, I need to understand what brought them here. And it's so clear that for the first 15 years, where they got, it's not back, right? So you don't want to change things, but culture is also about evolution, and the leaders and all the team members within the company are so crucial for where we're going and where we're coming from. So it is, I think, more asking the questions and really active listening on what makes on tick, and again looking at the surrounding, because there is an expression that I don't necessarily always subscribe to, but I think it's true too, that you need to be or to dare to at least question the chosen truth, which means that if you're going to continue to grow and if you're going to be relevant for your people and for your customers, you have to pressure test the formula and also kind of the principles that got you there. And so for me, it's been meeting as many people as possible and asking as many questions as possible, try to really digest what they are saying and become part of that. Even if I can't, I can't take credit of everything or anything that they have done, but really kind of frog leap and also just getting internalized into who I am, and then add a couple of things, hopefully, in a way, together with the rest of the executive team and together with my team and together with everybody that works there, of what the future should and could be. So we do it together.
No, no, very good. And obviously another really strong brand is Spotify, very strong brand. Everyone recognizes Spotify, and I think On as well. In the industry that On is in, it's definitely, it's got a lot of good brand recognition, I guess, and I guess it's how you capitalize on that within the organization as well. Now, you mentioned, Katerina, you've operated in HR for 30 years and operated at the top table for a long time now. How do you see the relationship between the CHRO, the CEO, and the rest of the C-suite evolving, especially now given all the advancement in AI and workforce transformation and those being front and center on board agendas?
I think it's easy to say in a short answer, it's never been as close, it's never been as strategic, and that I could stop there. But I also meet a lot of people that has the same job that still are struggling to get on the agenda, still struggling to actually sit in the C-suite. So if I expand that answer a bit, I think it's more about, again, putting those two acumens together. So you're helping the business evolve. You're helping the organization to embrace the new technology and also guiding them into new ways of working. Instead of scaring, I think it's very much about a mind shift right now, and being the behavior scientist and the specialist within that area, and also bringing all your people along. I think that is really, really key to what you are doing, right? So it's never been more important. I don't think the relationship has never been stronger. And I think it's not about either or when it comes to like all the dualities or polarities we talk about these days and the complexity. It's never been, an easy feat to do change management. It's never been easy to make sure that everybody gets on board. But then again, then everybody could do the work, right? But I think this is where we come in and what we bring to the table, because the future of work isn't man or machine, right? If we talk about tech as machine, it is a meaning plus machine, or tech. And that meaning, I think, is where we come into play, and where we can be very helpful. And also AI gives all the leaders, or the CEO or the C-suite the data, right? But culture tells them what to do with it. So again, that's if it's not really tangible or applicable by just saying these kind of catchy phrases, I think everybody understands that we play different roles here, and it's very, very helpful, hopefully. And then again, I think lastly, AI can map talent in a smart way, but only leaders can unleash it. So I think it's changing a bit, and it's like a prisma. If you tweak it or you turn it, the light will still come out, but maybe in a different way. So how do we organize ourselves? How do we work? How do we prepare our leaders? But for sure, how do we also address all our team members? And this is where I think the relationship is more interesting now. I think it's more dynamic. It's for sure more strategic.
In terms of your experience, Katarina, both from your own experience, but also what you see with some of your peers, and I know you had this at Spotify, and no doubt you're cultivating this on if you don't have it already. What does a genuinely strategic CHRO CEO partnership look like in practice?
No, but I think it's you have to choose each other. I think it starts there, and I think it's kind of one of those where people say that, but they maybe didn't. For sure, I choose to work with Daniel, actually more than I choose to join Spotify. And I also it's the same thing here, meeting the founders at On, and Martin, our CEO, was very much about like a very deliberate, a very conscious decision that we complement each other, and I like the vision, and we can do great work together. And I think that is a decision that a lot of HR people tell other people you should choose your boss, but might not be as smart when it comes to themselves. And I think that is really center of a lot of things. The other thing is obviously, uh, like in any relationship that is important, I think you need to have kind of the same values of where you're going. Then you should not, and this is me saying this, and people don't have to agree, but you should not agree on everything or the way to get there. But if the foundational is there, and you have the same beliefs, and also you subscribe to the same philosophy, the same kind of principles, and you, the rest will be more dynamic, right? It's going to be okay. We don't necessarily come to the same solution of how to get there, or what the first and next steps are, but it's kind of organic, and it's a partnership, and it's very much shoulder to shoulder, and the work will only improve when you sometimes have to debate a bit to get there. And then the debate is only healthy if you have that kind of safe, or you have something to bring where you can argue for it. So in many ways, we're all in sales. We are also all in marketing, right? You can't just go, trust me on this, or I'm experienced, or I have a gut feeling, right? You need to be able to sell. So there's always, I think, and should always be, because all the things that we bring to table is usually very long arches. It's not like the next semester or the next sales or report, or it's more like we set something out here to do something here, and then we're going over here, right? And that could sometimes make C-suite or your managers or your founders a bit nervous. Like, when do we see the result? I think you have to find a way, even if it's very hard, and maybe harder in my case, to describe, the method to the madness. And I've seen so many people struggle with things that we love to throw around, like culture. But if you don't know how to build, and you're not doing it all the time, I usually say that culture isn't a vibe. It obviously is, but it isn't a vibe. It's a verb. right? It means that you have to work at it all the time. You also need to know where you're going, and it's not about those football tables, right? It's not. It's actually being built in the doing and in the hiring, and it's in the onboarding, and it is in the learning more than anything else, and how you show up when it's hard. So it can't also be only when you are in hypergrowth. It's only when everything is like the results is coming in, and and the stock price is nice and happy. It's in every day, and like people all with with morale or ethics. It's the hardest time that define you, and that is also what's defines the culture.
So, a couple of things that you said there, Katarina, are really interesting. I mean, I think you talked about that importance of actually having a positive tension, I think, between the CEO and the CHRO, because if you just agree with everything, then that's not how progress gets made. I love the bit you said about culture. It's not just about when times are good. That's when you've got a strong culture. When things are tougher, I guess that becomes even more important there. And listening to what you said, I thought about an episode we did a few weeks ago with Jenny Dearborn, based on a book that she's published called The Insight Driven Leader. You obviously know Jenny. And she talked about the CEO CHRO relationship as a kind of 2x2. So you can have a great CHRO and maybe a new CEO comes in, and that CEO only sees HR as compliance, doesn't want them to be strategic. And that must be really difficult to manage as a CHRO in that respect. And then you've got it the other way around, where a CHRO maybe doesn't have that courage or that boldness that you've talked about, and is content to run maybe a traditional HR function, a support function, rather than a strategic one. What I was interested, just as a sort of follow up to that question, really is, where do you still see? You don't have to name them, obviously. Where do you still see some of your peers, your CHROs, underplaying their hand, and in what areas you feel that they can be a little bit more direct or bold with their peers?
Yeah, maybe easier to see where I see them being bold. I think for me, I also wrote a mini like blog post or article about it, or whatever it's called in LinkedIn, when you use a bit more of room. I think you can be a great HR person but still be an order taker. And what do I mean by that? Is when you say yes to everything, and I'm not talking about the things that are illegal and not compliant or anything like that, but you're actually follow what your leaders or the C-suite tells you. And I don't think that comes due to you being, junior, or you new in the role. That could explain for some, but I think it's also for you. You come from a point of view that you don't necessarily have a plan of your own, and you don't have that healthy debate that she's talking about in the book too, or where the relationship kind of sometimes changes a bit. And I think it also is grounded in where we were in the beginning of the conversation of, you have to choose each other. So if it changes along the line, the two people, the person that got you, or where you got a new CEO in the CHRO's case, you have to then actively choose each other and say, do we want to do the same things? Because obviously you will have, like every other leaders, you will have some CHROs that leans one way or another, have strengths in some corners of, it's 181 colors on the palette. You're not going to be super strong in all of all of them, right? You're going to play. So there's going to be journeys, there's going to be phases in a company, but also there's going to be CEOs that matches you, and also I think challenge you in a very good and healthy, and for the company great way. And then you have to dare to also then step out. Sometimes the company is good, the person that will come after the CEO you chose, they might be good, but it's for you. And I think when you sit and you get complacent, or you don't want to change again, or you don't want to go to another company, I think you need to, if you're going to do your best work. But back to the order takers, I think there is another risk where you are semi, experienced, or you are experienced, that you just want to fit in. you just want to be liked. And I think that is a second kind of type of why you end up being order taker. The third one I think is also quite common, is when you end up saying yes, and you do and you execute. I think there's a bit a misconception that when you execute, you're doing a good job. But what are you executing? And if you don't have a plan or you don't challenge, you're not adding, right? It's not on top of. It could be a good cake, but it's not like that frosting on top, or it's not like, hey, let's tweak this and see how great we could be, or I'm just taking what you are asking me. And the thing is that I find to be not so smart about that. It's not about you adding you into it. It is when these two different roles come into kind of a yin and yang, and outcome is 1+1, and it actually is not 2, 3, or 4. It might be 5. And by just going yes sir or no sir, or yes ma'am or no ma'am, it's going to be somebody that is not, one, have your background, two, don't have your experience, and three, most likely is not leaning into the things that has to do with the changes that we see now, and where you don't have at least experience, and not your own, because that's not how old you are. 100 years of what has a workplace looked like. How do we come together? When do we do our best work? How do you rally the masses? How do you explain things? So on and so forth. And that is usually, most of the CEOs comes from either finance background or technology background or other backgrounds. And this is where you want to have that kind of, that doesn't have to do with, the combat of the brains, or who's right or wrong. It's getting better if you think about all the angles, and then you go to market, which means go into the organization. So I think that is important piece to the pie, and I think that should be considered. But then you have the bold people, right? I would be remiss if I didn't mention my great friend over at Grab, like Shin Jin Ung. I think the way that she is now looking into everything from technology, in the sense of having agents, or how they work, and doing that smart. I think that is applied AI rather than a technical approach AI. I think Avani at Atlassian, I think again, very bold, thinking about what does it mean, and very much aligned with the product. Jenny over at Canva, I think, very much also people first approach, and technology and hypergrowth. But what does that really mean for us, instead of, follow Simon, or Simon says? So I think there you have a couple of really cool, very kind of different type of CHROs, and they are not cloned, and they not like each other. But I think there's, and I can make the list quite long, of people that I don't think are order takers, or are doing what their CEOs are telling them. And I think what's right for all of them. I think they have a big voice in the organization, and two, I think they're very much inside out. They're not top down, right? And I think that is important. The last piece I think is, when you decide that you are running your company and not anybody else, or a trend is not running your company, is very, very important. Otherwise, I think you're also telling your people that it was something you did just because of, or it was some sort of tokenism. So back to kind of your, who are you, and what defines you? Then you will do things differently in different phases, and different phases of maturity, of course.
No, really, really helpful, Katarina. And you mentioned trends. Funny, it was a nice link to the next set of questions. So last year, well, actually earlier, actually right at the end of last year, you published on LinkedIn your 2025 HR predictions. And I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, Katarina. I think I wrote at the time they were my favorite set of predictions, because you got straight to the point, weren't fluffy. And there's no ulterior motive like there is with some people that put trends on. I'll probably include myself on that, to be honest with you. But one of the things that you wrote on there, and we'll put a link to those in the show notes, because actually they're still relevant. Predictions take a long time to come to fruition in many cases. But in the article, you talked about focusing more on the H than the R in HR. I really like that bit. Can you share more about this with listeners, and why you think this shift is so urgent?
I think it is urgent because, everybody's talked going into 2025. I still think a lot of people are talking about, and for good reasons, about efficiency and productivity, because it was more about building stuff and doing cool stuff. And I think, especially if you look into kind of the tech world, old technology and new technology was not meeting each other. And if they had a bit earlier, maybe, the bloatedness and the rifts that we saw around the world, not once, but twice or maybe even three times in some companies, wouldn't have happened. And there was kind of an overbelief in we need to be so many people because that's how we ship really fast, instead of looking into, processes, which most of the time is also a word that people are like, oh, let's not about that. If you are a startup or scale up, is something really bad. Or you're not necessarily looking into how you are organized, the way you do things, and if you actually, which usually sounds so cruel, but if you do it in a smart way, that is not what you are saying. Do we have the right people? It was always a new task, new people, a new area, a new feature, build something. It was always a new people that was, and it's quite one trick pony ish to do it that way. And then you had to learn the hard way, right? Where you go into old technology, or even the way that we used to assembly things, it was always how can we tweak, how can we get better. If we would have mixed that a bit earlier, that would have been a very, very important lesson for the companies that saw them having to say goodbye to 40, 50, 60, 70% of their employees. Obviously, always hard, never taken easy in any of these organizations, I'm sure. And then again, you can do it in different ways, good or bad, or dignified or not. But back to your core question, I think there are a couple of things that are true in that efficiency and productivity. I think sometimes people forget, how do you get there? It's not by telling people that we need to execute, or that I don't think we get there also with modern kind of workplace and the generations that are in masses in most of the workplaces. I think you have to, at least I believe strongly that if you want people to perform, you have to let them grow. And learning and development is not just training or courses or fluff or anything that is nice, but I think you have to be people first in that sense, or human first. And it doesn't mean that it's only about like sitting down and become by eye. I think everybody that's worked with me don't think that that's what I'm about, but it is about that human touch and thinking about who will design, who will make sure, where does all these big data come from. It is by somebody that program, it is by a lot of people using ChatGPT and forming it and teaching it and kind of learning the learning. And here I think if you are thinking about that, and also, to be honest, use is quite a harsh word, but it's you use your people to be more and to teach you to be more human. I think you will get more efficiency. I think that is how it is, but I think it's so easy for people to go and jump over that step of we will get more efficiency by telling people. We will get more efficiency by having people that already can do the job. Yes, but when you've been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, where is complacency closest to the people that can already do the job, or the people that are actually learning and enjoying where they're learning? So if you don't want to be short-sighted, I don't think you should be top down. If you don't want to be short-sighted, I don't think you're just going to recruit people that can already do the job. If you don't want to be short-sighted, it's not about having the information to the inner circle or the top few. I truly believe where people are informed, they will make better decisions, and they will also assume accountability, and they will also, as we know, proud people will perform, right? But if most things is happening like a Pope election, that very few people go into a room and think long, and sometimes, well, I guess hard, and out comes either black or white smoke. I'm not really sure if the rest will go like, oh, I will follow this and I will be happy doing this. And you know what? I'm going to be proud when I do this. And nobody's telling me how we got to that conclusion, why we choose him to be the next pope, or why we choose that to be the next thing that we're going to build or rally around. I just think that we know more about people and what makes them really go the extra mile.
And Conclave, great film. If everyone hasn't seen it, you get to see a little bit, well, dramatized version of what an election of a pope may look like. And hopefully, in the future, we might get a female pope. Who knows? So, Katarina, a couple of things you said there. I mean, obviously, that focus on learning, creating that culture of learning, allowing people the time and space and freedom to be curious, to experiment. You know, thinking that technology, in implementing technology, it's not just about implementing the technology and telling people to be efficient. You have to enable that change through culture and good management as well. And it made me think about a conversation we've had previously around this whole experimentation, this experiment culture as well. In your experience, what does good experimentation with AI look like, and what does bad experimentation look like?
I think it is. I mean, I think what I see and what I hear from most of my peers and their companies is, of course, awareness is very important, because with greater awareness, the fear will go away. But then when you experiment, or you have like, hey, we're going to open up and everybody can use whatever, Claude's or Canva or ChatGPT, whatever, it it's the same companies that also talk about efficiency. It's also the same company that wants to be financial prudent. So I think you have to think about a couple of things that it also goes with, with learning or growth. Like development is not a perk, right? I think you need to have a bit of structure. Then again, I feel that there is a not big divide in that sense. It's either or versus. But when I talk to most of my colleagues, and when I have had the chance now to look into and also visit companies that are more in, JPAC or in China or in that side of the world, they talk more about applied HR. What will the technology actually do for us, and where is it relevant, and where can we see the gains already? And that's where we kind of develop and make sure that we kind of invest. And when I talk to colleagues and friends, and also visit companies more, in the Americas or in US, it's very much more of technology for technology, and how cool it is, and what it could do. Not so much when or how, and how we will use that if we now apply it to workplace and workspace and the way that we do things. So I find that to be very two not well, almost opposite ways of looking at it. And if you then look at the more where I started, I find that to be a bit more attractive, because then it's applied AI. And it's easy to then to see, you go to your own fodder, you go to your own space and your own function. And then it's easy for me now with my team to go, what should we do? How should we apply it? What technology is interesting? And within that space, it's not just about pioneering or trying, or have like a full week of a fair where you can try everything, or you can download any kind of license. Because I think it is, again, with that growth and the awareness and the new technology, it when you trust your people, but you have a structure for it, it's kind of the fuel for the retention. It's fuel for the ambition, and it's the fuel for the loyalty. And when you start to think about applied AI or new ways of working and efficiency gains, but also how it will speed up things and take away repetitive things, and where pattern recognition can help us in so many ways, I think it's easy to then start to not imagine, but realize where where should we apply this and where can we use this? And already now, that means that we can stop doing this, start doing that, and really lean in and do more of this. And I think that is where it gets interesting. But then you connect that to with what we do for a living. Then you realize this is very much more about learning development. It is more about a culture thing because it's very much connected to change management, and it's also very much connected to kind of a mind shift rather than a tech shift.
Very good. We're gonna delve into where you think the field's going, some predictions, we can call them predictions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about. We're going to go talk a bit about diversity, equity, inclusion, which I know is something you've always been a passionate advocate of, and obviously it's come into the news this year as well. Talk about people analytics. You wouldn't expect to have a conversation with me and not talk about people analytics, and then we're going to get back onto the AI piece to finish, Katarina. So firstly, staying with predictions and maybe putting the lens forward a little bit, maybe for the next 2 to 3 years. And don't worry, I won't come back to you in 2 or 3 years and say that these were wrong or anything like that, because trust me, I get most of mine wrong. If you had to pick 2 or 3 themes, where you believe that will most fundamentally reshape HR in the next few years, which ones would you single out, and why?
I think we will see a lot of things changing quite fast with the help of technology when it comes to talent acquisition. It's very, very easy to see how that could help us with things that today is super time consuming, where I think we can see that things that we want to catch or things that we want it to help us recognize in the patterns could be here in a smart way and very helpful way, and where we can also then free time so that we could put that recruiting into recruiters. So that is one area. I think another area where we could see a lot of fast forward, obviously in the space of learning. I think we have heard people talk about blended learning, e-learning, and whatever learning. I still think that when we see the biggest result for the longest time has been very much on the job learning, meaning that you don't go to a seminar, you don't go to inspirational talks, you don't even go to like training camps in that sense where you practice, practice, practice. I think it's more about and I think we had big high hopes on augmented training, but it hasn't really in many areas helped if you're not practicing kind of landing a plane over and over again and getting it to a very precise skill set. So I'm not taking away the things where we have seen it, but I think learning is a very interesting space where we haven't seen it yet, but I think it's going to be pivotal when somebody cracks the code of how we can do that in the way that we are wired to learn things. Because I don't think any other things besides, and maybe it is because we start in school, that we then prefer almost to keep learning in that setup, even if we all say that we didn't like going to school. Maybe it's just one of those habits that you have to break to find new ways to speed that up. I would love for it to happen when I sleep with my headset or something like that, right? Really just having cool things to come in that way. But and then if I'm going to just do one more area of all the interesting areas, I think, in the space of communication slash labor relations, labor law, all these things that are very important that we get right when it comes to contracts making or doing right by our people. It's been very much manual work and it's been very time consuming. And even if you have a template, it's still somebody that reads through that and does the right template or contract go to the right person in that part of the world. It's going to be crazy. But there are two things that I still are wondering why we don't see with the technology where it is and where it's been. I don't know how many people in HR that not on a daily, maybe not on a weekly basis, but every time you do a reorg or you want to explain something, you kind of manually do an org, you know what I'm talking, right? Chart. Uh, and it takes so much time. And with some new tools, it looks nicer and nicer, and it might go faster and faster. But why can't you just say to your operating system that, or why don't you just speak? I want this organization to be going from functional to business areas. Can you just rewrite the boxes, or can you go from that to into 100% the matrix dilemma, or verticals and horizontals, whatever. Today you sit and do that. How time consuming is that? And you go, how strategic is that? No, but if you're going to complain, if you're going to explain or complain, explain to people, it is a map, right? So it's not about the hierarchies, it's about the map. And that will be very central, especially if you're going to change quite rapidly. So those will be some of the areas that I think that somebody just needs to double down. But I can't see that it will not roll over and change everything that we do from the way we do it today.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a huge opportunity for the field really to become more effective and more impactful, um, applying technology in the right areas, and as you said, have that mindset change and that change management in place to actually make it effective as well. And I guess ease. I mean, you kind of referred to it earlier. You didn't call it this, but the shiny new toy thing that we hear about a lot if we go to conferences or we read LinkedIn and listen to some of the analysts. I guess in HR you've got to be careful and just apply the things within your organization that actually solve some of the business challenges that you're trying to solve. So in a company like yours and in Spotify, I mean, recruitment is always important, but when you're scaling, it's even more important that you get it right, isn't it? So you're going to invest a lot of your time and effort in making talent acquisition as effective as possible, so you're getting the right people in at the right time. In another organization where maybe you're actually more focused on reskilling, for example, then you're going to really double down on what you've said about learning. If you're transforming as an organization, then you've got to really think about, as you said, you want some dynamics and be able to scenario plan much quicker by looking at different options around reorganization as well. So it's just, I guess, listening to you, Katarina, it's just that if you're in HR, there's so many things you can do. And I guess you've got to prioritize, just focus on the stuff that's most important to your organization, I guess.
If you're going to recruit, you're going to have interviews. If you're going to have interviews, at some point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, maybe if you recruit in committees, 15 people's calendars and also the poor candidate. That's the person that is trying to find that time. Why isn't there a digital kind of spider that goes into all the and just find that time? Why is that a person that does that? And then you go man hours, and then you add, if you are in an organization that loves meetings, every time 2 people, there's at least 2 admin people, chiefs of staffs, or EAs that are trying to do that. How many roles are that? And it's not about them losing their job either. What could they do with that time? So I think sometimes we go and love to go to the complex and like, how can we save humanity? And that would be lovely. But I think it's the easiest task that nobody's working with that would be like revolutionizing your kind of, oh my God, it's freeing up time.
Obviously, diversity, equity, and inclusion, Katarina, has been in the news a lot this year, not always for good reasons, given that some companies are pulling back from it. I think a lot of companies are still actually doing it and maybe just being a bit quieter about it. Um, what role do you believe HR leaders should play in keeping inclusion, equity, and diversity front and center?
But first of all, I think you have to decide if you are running your company or somebody else is running your company. And 2, you also have to go back to why was it important? If it was tokenism and you now found a reason that you could drop it, good for you. And most likely, both your employees will then understand that, and also your customer. But if you truly believe that you want to be diverse for any good reasons, and it could be any, right? It's good. I think it's good for you if you want to be creative, if you believe in being innovative, and if you think it drives, a very sincere wish to mirror both the society, all your employees, but also the customers. There's a long list of why you should do it. But again, I think it comes down to bold cultures don't happen by accident, right? They are designed and they are defended. It's that easy. And if you're not intentional, you will end up with a culture, not just the one, but just not the one you want. And I think that is also very true when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it's not easy. If it was easy, every company would do this, and every society would have like cracked the code, and every part of the world would not have these issues or problems that we are facing. And what I kind of like with the era right now is you can see the companies that are not necessarily excelling, but it was always important to them for the right reasons. And they might not go to the mountains and shout about it for different reasons, but they're still working at it, and they still have functions, and they still have people, and it's still kind of a part of who they are. And I think that it has to do with not just diversity, and equity, inclusion, and belonging. I think that has to do with social impact. I think it has to do with, sustainability. What type of global citizen do you want to be and your company? And it's not about, hey, we do everything right. It's more about, hey, we would like to do our best within this space because we think everybody benefits from it. And I think that is a very important kind of thing to describe. But I also think we all know, and yeah, again, it's easy, but it's hard. It's easy because when everybody comes from the same background, went to the same schools, have the same experience, it's going to be very hard to stay relevant, because you will come to the same conclusion. You're going to produce the same service or the same product over and over again, but maybe put a new kind of like a nice sticker on it or something. And people are not stupid. They have like really sensitive whiskers. And therefore I think it's easier now to see and look and admire or be inspired of I think the good and the struggling and the people that also the companies that are also admitting the challenges but still working at it.
And it's such an important point, isn't it? I mean, whether it was Spotify or now on, your customers are all different types, different countries, male, female, different ethnicities, different religions, everything different. So you want to reflect your customer base in your employee base, because as you said, then you get the innovation, and then you understand the different markets. So that's just business, and then there's the right thing to do as well. And I think they combine together, don't they?
They do, and I think also we all know that people choose, and they choose wisely, both when they decide to go somewhere, when they decide that they don't want to work there anymore, and also when they're going to buy something or consume something. So again, I never would like to kind of be the spokesperson for tokenism, and therefore I think people are showing, and therefore also companies are showing their right and true kind of efforts within this space, which is helpful if you want to be intentional of who you socialize with, who you choose as an employer, what products and services you're going to use. And I think the answer is within these spaces. Social impact, what do you do there? Sustainability, what are you trying to do there? And also, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. It's not about, if you have the best tool or you have the best product or you have the best service. Uh, I don't think people choose that way. They might be interested first, but then I don't think you get loyal. I don't think you get loyal employees. I don't think you get loyal customers by not being a good citizen.
Okay, so last couple of questions, Katarina. First one on people analytics. Given our focus at Insight 222, you wouldn't expect anything different but to me to ask you a question about people analytics. However, one of the things that we've seen over the years that we've been doing this is that important relationship between people analytics and the CHRO. And I'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from your, all your experience as a CHRO about where people analytics should sit and how it should work with HR and the business? And maybe a second part to that question, as a CHRO, what are the 2 or 3 key capabilities that you need in your analytics team?
Good questions, and yes, David, I would be very surprised if we didn't get to people analytics. But I'm going to be very honest. I think having a couple of KPIs that was kind of the traditional ones within HR. I think that was enough for me for the longest time. And when I tried to add what I was looking for, I used to come into something that I describe as HR insights, which is exactly the same thing. I didn't want anybody to just, or us as a function, to just collect the dots. I wanted somebody or a function or AI to also really kind of connect the dots, meaning I wanted a conclusion. I wanted to get the analysis. I wanted us to discuss kind of the data sets rather than look at them like, okay, we have this many, here's the number for attrition. This is the number of people that choose different things in the total reward kind of framework. This is this and that. And I always thought it was like, yes, it's a metrics like all other functions, and that seems to be very, very important to have because all the other functions have them. Not until I got to work where I thought it was quite interesting to see how we can embed ourselves into the more company decisions. In in a very global and fast-paced growing company, where everything that you have as data sets of how does talent density look like? How do we drill into that? And if you lay that with the information of labor law, attrition in that state or in that city, or even in that town, right? How long do people stay? And then you slice it in what does compensation look like? And so on and so forth. Then it starts to get really interesting of where do we open our next store? Where do we open our next office? Why in this city or this country or this region even? And is it easy to find that space for stores there or an office, especially if you're going to go for a triple A location? And all of a sudden it's more business decisions, right? And I realized we had all that data. It wasn't really contaminated. It didn't need to be scrubbed, but we didn't use it in a smart way. And we didn't open the kimono and showed it to the rest of the business. We kind of sat with it over at HR for the longest time. And then also when you look into kind of the org and how it's married, like the data sets is married with each other, and then it gets really interesting, right? I usually, and then when I started to talk about it, like, locks, when the boat is going from one area to another, and how you need to kind of close the locks and get that data to flow. This is most people looked at me like I was a crazy person, and then I met Gary Monroe, and he looked at me. Yes, we can do a lot of things with this, and then he started to describe that and and also build things that could be helpful. So where should it sit? It should sit left, right, and dead center of everything that you do. You will take much more informed decisions. It's going to speed you up. It's also going to help what I think is a very central function within HR, which is the BPs. They will move with confidence. They can speak on the go. They can get a question in their lead teams and executive teams, and they in the instant, if you have a good system or tool, they can show exactly whatever people are asking, no matter what different things that they want to combine. And you will have mosaic that you can talk to. So you get storytelling in place, you get data sets in place, you get better informed decisions, and it will be much faster, and therefore it will be more fun.
I love that. They, don't just collect the dots, connect them and drive action. I've heard it said, it's not my phrase. I'd love to have said it was me, but it's not. Insight without outcome is overhead,
Yes.
and I think you've got to drive decisions with this for a purpose. I think it's really important. So, Katarina,
Yes.
last question, and this is the question we're asking all our guests in the series, including your good friend Tomas Tomorrow-Music, who was a couple of episodes ago. Um, how can chief people officers, and you've talked a little bit to this, so maybe it's an opportunity to summarize and maybe add a couple of other points as well. How can chief people officers influence leaders to use AI to augment rather than replace talent?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I heard it because I listened to all the episodes and people say really brilliant things. But I think it comes down to, and I don't want to copy, it's easy to steal with pride, right? But I think to the point that one of the most important thing is we all use it differently because we are all in different environment. And I think it's not one size fits all for me. I think it's really of who are you, what do you want to be, for whom, and how will you use it. I think it's where we need to be a bit clever on how we think about these things. And for sure, um, whatever I would answer where I'm now at on would not be the answers I would have when I was a Spotify run. And people keep asking me about things of my former kind of company, and I was there for 12 years, and I bled green, and I love them, and I wish them all the success. But one thing that I always thought was interesting that is connected to this answer is this: the people that left a company that is moving that fast, and then answered like dead seriously of what it was like after 6 months or 12 months or even after a couple of years. And that company changes every quarter. So I can't even speak to what's happening there anymore. I don't know what's happening there anymore, and it's not my business to talk about that. And that is, and I think that is connected to your question: is what do you want to do with it, and what makes sense to your people, your company, your business idea. So you have to go back to every time in my world to the game theory, meaning the business theory and idea. That is where it starts, and that's where you will find the answer how to do it.
And I think, as you said as well earlier in the conversation, Katarina, clearly the one of the things that AI is bringing is we need new
Yeah,
skills, new capabilities within the
yeah,
organization. And the traditional way that we do that in companies is we let people go and we hire new people. And I think you've really focused on the importance of learning and reskilling people and giving people the opportunity to acquire those new skills as well. We spoke to one of your peers, Tanuj Kapilasharami at Standard Chartered, and they focused on reskilling because A, it's the kind of the right thing to do, but B, it saves a huge amount of money. And it doesn't have the negative impact on culture of having massive layoffs, and it can drive business results as well. So I think one of the things that I've heard from you really that helps with this question as well is that focus on learning, really, and becoming a learning organization. It's really important. And I guess if any executive is going to be having that conversation with the rest of the C-suite, it's the CHRO.
I think it is. And if you're going to double down on anything right now, I think it is learning. And if you're going to take away something from this conversation, is make your culture count. Don't do fellowship, do leadership, and make it intentional.
Perfect. That's going to be the quote that appears on the LinkedIn post. By the way, that's really really good, Katarina. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Looking forward to hopefully seeing you in person at some point as well. Can you share with listeners how they can follow all the great work that you're doing and maybe learn more about any opportunities that are on as well?
Well, I'm usually quite transparent on LinkedIn, so I think that is where it's easiest to follow what's happening, where I share a bit of my ideas and things that really either upsets me or things that I'm very passionate, more what I'm passionate about, I think. The VOD that I do with Anne-Marie is paused. I think we're going to bring it up again, actually. So beyond the outlook for the podcast. But otherwise, I think it's going to be very much related to what we do at in the HR and talent space over at On.
Perfect. And again, for those that already don't, do follow Katarina on LinkedIn. You'll see that you do a number of walks and talks, which I definitely recommend people have a connect with as well. Katarina, absolute pleasure to speak with you again. Thank you for being a guest on the Digital HR Leaders podcast for the second time.
It was my pleasure, David. Thank you very much for having me.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.